this is read. So with that said, welcome everybody to the Joint Public Works Transportation Committee meeting. Today is May 4th, 2021. We've already done roll call. Second item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the April 15th, 2021 Public Works Committee meeting. Item number 3 is presentation by the Office of Transportation on Truck Routes Annual Permitting Report, Section 154-1524 per amendments to calendar ordinance number 33107A, truck and oversized vehicle stakeholder engagement efforts for 2020. Item number 4, presentation by the Office of Transportation on the Complete Streets Program Annual Report and Public Engagement Updates per Policy Memorandum number 134R. Number 5, ordinance calendar number 33304, an amendment to reordain section 162-1634 and ordain division 8, section 162-1670 for the purpose of defining pedal carriages and forbidding the operation of a pedal carriage or the offering of transportation for hire and pedal carriage within the city of New Orleans. And then item number 6 is adjournment. So with that, it is now 1:03. We will stand at ease. Hello, Councilmember Nguyen. We will stand at ease till 1:13, and then we will pick up from there. Thank you, everybody. All right. All right, members, we'll be coming back in 2 minutes. All right, members, we'll be resuming in 1 minute. All right, I'll call the meeting back to order and reestablishing quorum for the 2 different committees as we do the joint committee today. I'm here and serve on both. See, Councilmember Moreno is on the line for Public Works. Councilmember Banks is on the line for Public Works. Councilmember Palmer is on the line for Public Works, and Councilmember Galapion is on as well. And then for Transportation, Chairwoman Gilson Palmer, Councilmember Nguyen, myself, and Councilmember Galapion. So we have quorums established on both committees here. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. With that, I know we have 2 presentations. They're connected with each other from the Office of Transportation about truck routes, the permitting process with those, and also I would think enforcement as being one of the issues, and then what is now going to become our annual report on the Complete Streets program and public engagement as well, and then followed by an ordinance. So with that, I will hand it over to Transportation. I don't know if Dan, Laura, I see you're both on the line. Oh, sorry. Yes. And Nathan reminded me that before we get to the presentations that I need to approve the minutes. So I'll make a motion to approve the April 15th minutes. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Palmer. If any member of the Public Works Committee is against the minutes, speak now or forever hold your peace. We'll make it easy. All right. So that's 5 yays and no nays. And the minutes are approved. Thank you, Nathan, for reminding me about that. All right. I was so excited about the topics that I forgot the agenda item. So Dan and Laura, it's good to see you all today. And we're excited about these topics. I know we'll have some questions, and I asked Paul before we got on about how many comments. We have 39 comments at least, maybe even more than that now. So for not being a city council meeting, that's a pretty robust agenda. And we'll let you all kick it off. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks. My name is Bryan. I'm the director for the Mayor's Office of Transportation. I'm here. I'm going to be listening, but Dan is really going to be walking you through these presentations. So I'm going to kick it over to him. Thank you all.
Thanks, Laura. Dan?
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Council Member. I'll be providing an update on the truck route, truck regulations, and oversized vehicle stakeholder engagement process. Alan Ural, the Chief Traffic Engineer with the Department of Public Works, will be providing an update on the permitting since the amendment was modified last year. collect additional information and report on that. So I guess my first question is, council member, do you want Alan to present on those numbers first, or do you want me to provide the update on the engagement process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Dan. I appreciate it. I think why don't we do the permitting issue first, and then we can talk about the process. I think the two flow from there. Thank you. Hey, Alan.
Okay, here I am. Alan's on. A little technical difficulties.
I've been there. Good to see. Good to hear from you, Alan.
All right. As far as the oversized load permits from last year, we issued a total of 334 oversized load permits. Of those, 162 were annual permits, and 172 of them were single trip permits. Of the single trips, we issued 21 permits for inside the French Quarter, which, as we know, has a different set of regulations than the overall truck routes in the city. And I know one of the other requirements were to report on any kind of damage as a result of violations of the truck route laws. In Public Works, we have not been made aware of any damage as a result of any kind of permits that we've issued or trucks that may have violated these permits.
And Alan, when you're talking about violation of permits, does that include trucks like turning the wrong ways on streets or being where it may not be the shortest practicable route?
Well, a violation would be if they got off the route that they were assigned to as per single trips, or as per annuals, it would be if they didn't take the shortest practicable route. Those would be what violations would constitute.
Okay, because I guess, and I don't know, I welcome comments from my colleagues, and I know I feel like outside District A, this has been an issue, Councilmember Palmer and Councilmember Nguyen, that we repeatedly are getting, particularly on Henry Clay, complaints about trucks not using the shortest practicable route. And I know we sent photos the other day to Dan of a truck that was stuck. That's me. Councilmember Nguyen or Palmer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to.
I just wanted to add.
Go ahead, Cindy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna just add, we experienced the same in the L9, but I have a question. And in the East, who actually issued the violation?
So Alan,
Dan or Alan?
Yeah, I think the question is, if there were to be a violation, would it be DPW or NOPD or another body who would issue the violation? From Councilmember Nguyen.
Enforcement of the truck route laws does fall to the NOPD, so they would have to issue any violations.
Okay, so I think that's one of the mystery behind all this, is that we would see it, I guess, call NOPD. And I don't know if there needs to be some sort of training in reference to NOPD and violation with truck route. Okay. Let's try to solve this mystery.
Councilmember Palmer.
Yeah, I just wanted for you to elaborate a little bit more on how many tickets y'all gave in the French Quarter with oversized vehicles and how much that netted.
Okay, I mean, I can only speak for permits, not for tickets. Again, ticket enforcement falls to NOPD. I don't know what they've issued. As far as we've issued 21 permits last year for larger vehicles to move through the French Quarter.
Okay, and then and how do you alert people when you're giving out these permits?
I'm not aware of any alerting process as far as the general public goes. The permit is issued and the route is listed on the permit, and the applicant gets that permit with the route on it. And
then what's the application process for them to get a permit? I mean, we're very concerned in terms of the French Quarter. As you know, I mean, the size of the streets, the overcrowding, these oversized vehicles are consistently hitting gallery poles and tearing up the streets. So I just want to know what goes into the thought when you issue these.
Well, basically, we take where they're coming from and where they're going to, and we route them the straightest route possible in the French Quarter. Generally, it's been easy to do that. However, with the Hard Rock situation, we've had to allow an extra turn or two because you couldn't go straight through like you normally could. So that was a problem for last year. But the general rule is you're going straight through. If you come in from Canal Street, you're going to Esplanade. If you have to get Lake River, you're coming from Rampart or from Decatur Peters and going straight out that way. That's how we always route these permits.
So, but you give them regardless of the size and the height and the weight? All you have to do, regardless of size, weight, and height, as long as you fill out a permit, you get it? Are there any ways that you potentially wouldn't get it if the vehicle's too large or too heavy?
Yes, those are looked at as well. We have to make sure that they can actually make this route. So we are going to look at the sizes, and we also question them to make sure they can't be broken down, to smaller units. Some of these permits are actually basically tour buses, going to hotels. That's what quite a few of these 21 were. We get them to a front of the hotel and get them straight out the quarter. That's the best I can tell you on that. There were a couple of other larger trucks who were making deliveries. That's what I can tell you about the French Quarter permits. But no, they don't automatically get one because they apply.
Okay, so how many have you turned down in the past?
I don't have that number in front of me. I'd have to get with my permitting section and see what we reviewed that we didn't allow to go, but I don't have that right now. Okay,
do you mind, and I appreciate it, Mr. Would you mind getting me that breakdown? I'd like the breakdown of who the applicants were for those, what they were utilized for, and how many you've turned down. Because I'm also interested, right, in, just like you said earlier, the education process with the applicants. Like, if you have repeat people asking you for waivers in the French Quarter and their hotels, they should be, there should be an education process for them to utilize smaller bus companies or vans, right?
I agree. Given there are only 21 issued for the year, I think that's getting out there. I know we did have one I dealt with personally that was very upset we wouldn't let them actually go in front of the hotel because it couldn't make a turn. And we forced them to drop the people off at the corner, which apparently was a traumatic experience for them to walk half a block to the hotel entrance. But I know that one I dealt personally with and explained to them, no, you can't turn. You're going to drop them off right here, and that's the best we can do for you. But we did attach a spreadsheet of the permits to the agenda, so that should be there. But that doesn't include anything we might have turned down. I'll have to go separately back and get that.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Palmer. And I think to your point, I feel like it's a little bit of the STR discussion again. Knowing the number of violations, whether it's in the L9, the E, District C, District A, B, is helpful. Well, I appreciate that's a different department, but if I think we're saying we're really trying to have better enforcement and we're watching, then we need to know how many citations were issued. And I can't tell that right now. And I'd like to be able, particularly in District A, the three areas are Holly Grove, Mid-City, Uptown, where we get a lot of these complaints. I'd like to be able to say, well, I know at least this many citations have been issued.
I'll reach out to the police and find out how to track that down, whether it's by district or there's one place that has all the citations listed. But we'll reach out and try to get that number.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody else on the permitting? Okay, Dan. Thank you, Alan.
All right, I think I'm back. Thank you, Alan. I think Paul or whomever is controlling the share screen needs to put the presentation up. Perfect. Thank you, Paul. All right. So As the agenda stated, this is an update on the trucks and oversized vehicle routes and regulations engagement that we started earlier or about late last year in the fall. Thank you. Okay, so this fits into the Moving New Orleans Transportation Action Plan, which is built around 4 themes: safety, equity, efficiency, and connectivity. And this truck routes fits into the connectivity area of focus, specifically supporting movement of freight and cargo. Next slide, please. So the vision and expectations that we set with the stakeholders around this issue were to identify issues impacting oversized vehicles, engage in solutions-oriented discussions, inform our education, awareness, and enforcement efforts, and to then support regional efforts being spearheaded by our partners at the Regional Planning Commission, who can help us with liaisons with our neighboring parishes, as well as the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, since often is the case in freight movements and oversized vehicle movements, it's not strictly vehicles that are moving from one spot to another within the city of New Orleans, but vehicles that are having their origin or destination somewhere outside of the city as well. Next slide. So the items I wanted to touch on and provide updates today, going over the stakeholders and our engagement with them, the progress that has been made on the various activities that we identified at the beginning of this process, and where we're headed with next steps. Next slide. So we identified a number of stakeholders that we wanted to involve in this process. On the public sector side, that involved a number of different departments across the administrative side of the city, including Department of Public Works, Ground Transportation, NOPD, neighborhood engagement, et cetera. And then, of course, the City Council. Many, if not most of your offices have engaged with us on this, have connected residents that have observations and concerns about truck operations, and we appreciate that, connect those connections and your participation, and particularly your participation in helping get more detail when either yourselves or your constituents are observing these issues, so that we're able to better understand the issues and engage with the trucking companies that may be leading to these. Those kinds of details include, the day and time that the issue was occurring, if possible, the name of the company on the truck involved, because it's much easier to be able to follow up on any particular incident and try to determine what was going on and how we can get compliance from that company with those kinds of details, as opposed to just a more generic report of, oh, there was a truck driving down this street. We're not able to do very much with that kind of general information. So we appreciate, council members, your assistance in helping spread that word to your constituents, that if they're able to provide more details about potential incidents, that helps us in addressing them. Next slide, please. We then also identified and engaged with a number of external stakeholders outside of the city. That included the Louisiana Department of Transportation, the Port of New Orleans, and the Regional Planning Commission, and then a number of organizations that represent different trucking and freight industries, such as the American Trucking Association, IFCABANO, and don't ask me to remember what that acronym stands for, the Louisiana Motor Transport Association, the Restaurant Association, the Traffic and Transportation Club, and the World Trade Center. And then we had some individual stakeholders throughout the process that approached us wanting to be involved in the process and share their perspectives and thoughts, such as Gray Lion Tours, Hotard Coaches, and Lighthouse Louisiana. And then we've done outreach directly with neighborhood leadership from the various civic associations across the city, so that we can get that direct information from residents and from resident associations about the issues that they're observing in their neighborhoods, so that we could see how that fits into the broader picture and some of the common themes that we're seeing either in certain parts of the city or issues that are universal across the city from neighborhood to neighborhood. So the engagement with these stakeholders occurred over a series of meetings in the fall, generally about a month apart each time, August through December. And during those meetings, we collected input on the various topics of interest, and that ranges from the truck routes themselves to issues around truck parking and the weight and size restrictions that are outlined in the city code. We engaged with people to point us towards resources that they knew were available that they thought might be helpful for informing our process. We talked about curb management issues. So we really tried to capture a large amount of information that people were sharing to inform a broader conversation about how we can really better address our compliance issues generally around oversized vehicles, and then work to come up with solutions that, going back to our vision, those results-oriented solutions, and have an approach that involves awareness, education, and enforcement, knowing that we have to have a strategy that addresses all those points if we really want to see that compliance increase. Next slide, please. So we identified a number of issues, and we kind of grouped them into different categories. And these are the items that we have been working to implement around the input that we've received from stakeholders. So on the truck route network, towards the beginning of this, we made proposed a series of technical amendments to clean up and clarify the truck routes, and presented that as an ordinance to this council in September of 2020. And we appreciate council members, your support in passing that amendment, allowing us to have an updated, clear, without old roads that names had changed or even street layouts had changed, where the list itself just was not a clear and concise list that would allow for us to easily point people towards as here's the definitive list of truck routes for people that are either intimately familiar with the roads of New Orleans or people that are less familiar. So with those technical amendments, that has now provided us a foundation to start moving forward on other efforts around signage, around education and outreach, and around enforcement. As you'll see,
Can I stop you there? So
yeah, sure.
I guess the question I have now is foundation to support means there will be work. What can be expected about getting the signage up and education, et cetera? I just want to make sure we're talking about some timelines. Yeah.
Good question, council member. The signing is happening right now. So Alan just provided us an update a few days ago in terms of this presentation. With the updated list, the sign shop has been surveying and replacing all the truck route signs along the designated truck routes citywide. They're between 35 and 50%. I don't know if Alan, if he's still here, he might have an updated number as of today, of the routes citywide have been re-signed, and that process is continuing. So what that involves is the signs that identify the roadway as a truck route, and at locations where truck routes intersect with each other, supplemental arrow signage to indicate which directions at an intersection continue to be truck routes. So that's what's going on with signage. And I'll touch a little bit more on the education and outreach and enforcement on the next two slides. On the mapping side, actually, this is one of those education and outreach. On the mapping side, we've created and published a public-facing map, both as a static PDF and as a digital map that people can access online and navigate around. And that fits into, like I said, the education to raise awareness of stakeholders, whether it's trucking companies or our residents themselves, to understand where the designated routes are and put into context where trucks may or may not be operating, and for the operators themselves, where the designated routes are, so that they're using those until, as mentioned before, they may have to leave a truck route via the shortest practical route to access their final origin or destination. Next slide. Just for reference, this is that map that resides online for anyone to be able to view and download of the truck routes, reflecting the technical changes that were made in late 2020. Next slide. So we touched on signage a minute ago on your question, Councilmember Druso. So DPW continues to do their surveying and installing the signs along the truck routes, replacing missing signs, replacing damaged signs. And we have been engaging with stakeholders on locations or corridors that may require no truck route signs. We got feedback around that when we did the neighborhood leadership engagement. And we've continued to receive one-off requests or inquiries from various neighborhoods about the potential locations where such signage may be needed, both directly from neighborhood associations and as well as through council offices. So if you continue to receive those kinds of requests, please forward them on to myself and or Alan. The traffic engineering division will review those and determine what signage is appropriate for potential no truck route signage is appropriate. On the 311 reporting side, initially we were looking at creating a new vehicle violation event so that someone could report if they suspected a truck route violation was occurring through 311. As we went into this, it also became clear that truck parking violations were an issue that needed to be better documented and collected. I know this is an issue that Councilmember Nguyen has brought up, particularly in District E. So we're moving in the direction of having a reporting event for both route violations and for parking violations. These are in progress, and we're hoping to have them live on 311 within the next, I would say, 60 days, so that people will be able to, either through calling or going online to 311, be able to report any violations that they suspect so that we can investigate. All right, on permits, we have modified the online oversized vehicle permitting to ensure that we're collecting company names now. That was not consistently happening before, and that will help us better understand, similar to the report that Alan just provided, who are the entities that are applying for and obtaining the majority of permits, both single use or annual, and that'll give us a better sense of who is using these permits, where they're using them, et cetera. In the past, sometimes within the same company, different people applied for permits, and sometimes only those individuals' names were being captured as opposed to the company name. So it made it a little hard, made it more difficult to determine who was actually applying for and using the permits. An in-progress effort, and that'll probably continue to always be in progress as new people apply, will be ensuring that we're providing those applicants, both the one-time and the annual permit applicants, the information that they need about the truck route map and other relevant regulations around trucks. Right now, that is directing people towards the online resources. I'm hopeful that we can secure some resources to produce hard copies of this material as well in the future that could be included with the permits when they're shared with applicants. And then the education and outreach, I've mentioned some of what we're doing there. One thing that we've created the truck and oversized vehicle webpage to be a central clearinghouse for this information that we're creating, so that we can, so that everyone, whether from the administration or from council offices, can point people towards, here's where you'll be able to get the information you need about truck routes, around truck regulations, parking rules, etc. Expanding on the previous point about providing this information to permit holders, we also hope to be able to more proactively just share this information with oversized vehicle operators throughout the region, whether they're operating vehicles that require a permit or not. Because we know that there are trucks that don't meet the requirements for a permit that are still operating in the city, and we want to try to ensure that they're not causing compliance issues either, or ending up on streets where they can't fit or causing damage. So that's a proactive area where we're trying to reach that broader audience besides just our permit holders. And then in progress, as we've talked about a couple times in this, is just ongoing engagement with the public, with our residents, whether that's through the council offices or through the neighborhood engagement office, on violations. And once the 311 reporting is live, we'll encourage people to use that as a way to file those reports and have them documented. But of course, we will still, I'm sure, get engagement through the council and through the neighborhood engagement, and that's fine as well. Next slide, please. Enforcement, in the short term, currently what we're doing, we're informing targeted enforcement based on the stakeholder and community input we're receiving. And in the long-term outlook that we want is to be able to use those 311 reports that people submit to further inform targeted enforcement that NOPD does around areas where we're getting reports of violations and compliance issues. Next slide, please.
Dan,
yes,
to that
Councilmember.
point, any idea about once 311 got changed for this, how many 311 reports have been generated, I guess, number one, against trucks, and then number two, what actions were taken as a result of those 311 reports?
Yeah, so sorry, there might have been some misunderstanding. It's the 311 reporting is not live yet.
Okay.
I'm hoping in the next 60 days that both the option to report a route violation, potential route violation, or a potential parking violation will be live for people to use 311 instead of having to call it into Public Works or call it into any of your offices. And once we've got that reporting live, then we'll be able to compile those kinds of numbers as to what is the volume of reports that are coming in and how they are being handled.
Thank you.
Sure. So next steps that are underway, we've talked about these kind of throughout the update, but just to summarize, the signage, that's signage along the designated routes, that installation is underway and is going to continue until complete citywide along all the designated routes. Our education efforts, as I mentioned, we're hoping to increase the proactive distribution of the truck route map and rules, both to permit applicants as well as just freight operator stakeholders generally, to get to that improved compliance by getting the information they need into their hands. We just talked about the 311 that is hoping to have that live within the next 60 days for both potential route and parking violations. And then in the more medium term, we are working with the Regional Planning Commission to develop a scope and budget in order to do an origin and destination study. And the goal there would be to collect the information that the Department of Public Works and the Office of Transportation would need to have an informed process and decision-making around what changes may be necessary to the designated routes to meet the needs of the city today, as opposed to the needs the city had in past years or even past decades when routes were originally designated or changes were made to the routes. So really, instead of the key there is we want to have data to inform what kinds of decisions would be prudent, so that we're not just making changes without having a sense of what those impacts will be, both positive and negative, what those impacts may be. So that kind of summarizes where we are and the next steps around truck routes and our engagement process. And if there are other questions from you, council member, or from any of your colleagues, I'm happy to answer them.
I don't have any other questions. I guess the only follow-up I would just ask for, Dan, is the request that Councilmember Palmer and I both have on the enforcement side, and then please keeping us in the loop as 311 has the ability to capture both reporting on the truck routes and the parking that's plagued Councilmember Wynn's district, so we can start seeing that data too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right.
Yep, thank you.
Before we move on to the next item, Paul, do we have any public comments on truck routes?
We do. We have one comment on this item from Kathleen St. Germain. Oh, I apologize. That one's about complete streets.
Okay.
No comments on this item.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well then, Dan, are you sticking around to do the complete streets update?
I am. You get the return of Dan for another presentation.
We welcome the sequel.
Right, as soon as
Backdrop, Dan. We love your backdrop.
Thank you, council member. As soon as we get the next presentation loaded up, I will begin. All right. Well, so those of you just joining us in the audience, I'll introduce myself again. My name is Dan Jotras. I'm the Policy and Program Manager with the Mayor's Office of Transportation, and I'll be providing an update this afternoon on the city's complete streets policy. Next slide, please, Paul. So the agenda this afternoon will be an overview of the policy updates that were made in late 2020, updates around the community engagement process that was included in those policy updates. Our next steps moving forward around the Complete Streets Working Group, which was established under the governance section of the Complete Streets policy. And then just any progress on the ground and questions that members of this committee have. Next slide, please. So just a quick review of the timeline of where things have gone on Complete Streets. The City Council originally adopted a Complete Streets ordinance in 2011. And that led to the original CAO policy around Complete Streets in 2015. When the Cantrell administration took office in 2018, the Complete Streets policy was something that we started looking at, and community stakeholders started encouraging that it could be reviewed and updated to better meet the needs of the city, as well as consistency with the Moving New Orleans Transportation Action Plan, which the Cantrell administration developed and published in 2019. So in 2020, we developed a number of amendments to the existing policy, and that was adopted in October of 2020. And that brings us to where we are today, where we're on the verge of convening the Complete Streets Working Group as part of our ongoing efforts to institutionalize activities around complete streets and measure and report on how the policy is meeting our needs and being enacted on the streets and in projects. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to go back and touch on the highlights of what those changes and updates were made in 2020 to the policy. So they kind of fall into a number of areas. First, we establish specific responsibilities of the Complete Streets Working Group. I'll go into more detail on each of these in later slides. It integrates a community engagement protocol based on different scales of projects. It introduces specific implementation metrics and a reporting protocol, connects the Complete Streets efforts to other city policy goals, such as public health and community or economic development and resilience. And it defines 5 exceptions to the policy and a process for documenting when an exception is applied to a project. Next slide, please. So the Complete Streets Working Group, it serves in an advisory role to provide input around the policies and regulations developed within the context of the Complete Streets policy. And this working group is chaired by the director of the Mayor's Office of Transportation. Everyone heard from Laura at the beginning of this presentation, so she will be serving as the chair of this working group. And it is comprised of a number of other city departments and stakeholders. The policy itself identifies a number of city departments by name and also allows additional public entities and stakeholders to be included on that working group. When we convene on May 19th, in 2 weeks, there will be 18 entities across city departments and community stakeholders that are serving on that working group. And then it establishes the tasks that the working group will be addressing to assist with and make recommendations to the Department of Public Works. Next slide, please. The community engagement protocol, and I'm going to go over each of the areas where we amended the policy, and then I'm going to go back and provide some more updates on the working group and the community engagement in a few slides, just in case people have questions. We'll be going into more detail in a few minutes. So the community engagement protocol broadly requires that there be at least one public meeting during the design phase of a project when there are major operational changes being proposed in the scope of that project. It also requires that we provide at least 2 weeks notification to the public prior to a meeting being held, and that notification come from at least one of a number of different methods, which may be neighborhood canvassing, social media, neighborhood associations, the city website, et cetera. And that it requires the public meeting content from those meetings to be posted and available on the city's website.
Dan, can you give us rough numbers since we amended this? How many have been done, and have they obviously, I would imagine, be done by Zoom if there have been any?
Yeah, so these meetings have largely been associated with projects as part of the Moving New Orleans Bikes implementation that has been in implementing small neighborhood scale networks. We've been grouping projects together in that method. We started these public engagement process around the first group of projects in Algiers prior to the pandemic. So we did get a few of these in. The rest over the last year have been held virtually, and we've actually seen increases in participation. The virtual meetings often have a lower barrier to entry for people's time. It does have the trade-off that some people are not as comfortable or have access to technology. So there are those trade-offs there. But we've done 10 of these meetings now. I'm sorry, 12 of these meetings associated with projects coming out of the Moving New Orleans Bikes implementation. Next slide, Paul. So on the metrics and the reporting protocol, the policy calls for an annual written report to be prepared for the CAO by the Department of Public Works. It addresses the current and planned program goals, objectives, metrics, and achievements. And those metrics will address both a variety of things, including inputs and outputs, and the short-term and long-term impacts. And then that report will also include a listing of any exceptions that are approved per the guidelines in section 6 of the policy, where the 5 different exceptions are spelled out. Next slide, please.
Dan, can I ask, Aaron? So like, for example, on Marconi, where, a lane has been taken out, has there been measurement of increased bicyclists? What's going on with parking? Has there been more pedestrianization? Is there more business? I mean, how like in a real world example, how is it working?
Yeah, so there was, the Marconi project was completed in late 2019. And following that, DPW did a follow-up traffic counts and analysis, and luckily was able to complete that data collection prior to the COVID pandemic, so the numbers aren't impacted by that significant change in how we were all traveling or not traveling, as the case may be. And that the analysis from those counts have been published and is on the city's website. I don't have the link immediately on me, but we can point people towards that as a follow-up. From a safety perspective, typically we look at a 3-year period prior to a project and a 3-year period after the project to be able to compare the 2 time periods and observe the trends in safety impacts. So obviously we're not to that 3 years yet. We could get some preliminary impressions because we've got, we're coming up on a 1.5 years worth of time since the project was completed. So that may give us some indications. Similar to my last comment though, in this case, those numbers would be impacted by the changes in travel that occurred throughout much of last year because of the pandemic. So what we would most likely see decreases in many things just because of the change in the number of people using the road.
Yeah, obviously I know it's going to be hard to measure during COVID. And then also, Dan, I would even imagine sort of in the months as we're starting to emerge post-COVID, it may be sort of a false positive to certain degrees too, because you may have so many people excited to be outside or be other places that I think we have to measure at the right time.
Exactly. Determining the best time to measure, and then always just, keeping in mind that this time period will always, as they say in sports records, there'll always be an asterisk next to it, reminding us that these numbers are not necessarily representative of normal operating conditions because of the significant changes in travel that resulted during the pandemic.
And Dan, is the annual written report prepared for the CEO also published on the city's website?
Yes, that is also spelled out directly in the policy. So that'll be something that is made available and would likely be what is often would be turned to, presuming that this committee, either Public Works and or Transportation, would like to invite the administration annually to share the findings of those reports.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Sure thing. So in linking towards linking the Complete Streets policy to various policy objectives throughout the city, there's 9 different policy goals that are outlined in the document, where our goal is to connect Complete Streets to these other initiatives, and that's safety, connectivity, evaluation, multimodal accommodation, economic development, sustainability and resilience, coordination, equity, and livable communities. Next slide, please. And then the last big area of updates in the policy was around the policy exceptions. 5 of them are spelled out, as well as then a process for if a exception is being invoked on a project, how to properly document and get the approval for such an exception. So those exceptions are where specific users are prohibited. For example, along interstates. Sorry about that. My Zoom crashed momentarily, but I think I'm back.
You're back.
All right. My apologies. I think the last thing I was saying, so the first exception where specific users are prohibited, such as along the interstate, where cost is excessively disproportionate to the need or probable use, where there is a documented absence of current and or future need, for projects that involve emergency repairs, needing a immediate or rapid response, and routine maintenance that would not be changing the roadway geometry or operations. So shifting gears, first, getting back to your question, Council Member, well, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So shifting back to your question a few minutes ago, Councilmember Druso, about the community updates. So we've actually, as part of the Moving New Orleans Bikes project, that's where we've been having these community engagement or triggering this community engagement protocol. And we've actually been going beyond the minimum that the protocol requires. And for each project where there is a major operational change, we're hosting a pair of public meetings. First, a conceptual design meeting, where just that a conceptual design cross-section is shared with the public, and we are asking people a series of guiding framework to provide input on which direction we should move that design towards, asking questions such as, does this design adequately address the safety and equity, connectivity and efficiency for all users? Are there specific issues at the block level that we need to know about that we can investigate and incorporate into the design? And are there other design elements that should be considered in the design of the project?
Dan, can I ask you a question? I think it's great that you're doing two as opposed to one, but you use two words that people may want to know. You said major operational changes. Can you maybe describe briefly what would be the process if maybe you're just painting something that wouldn't require this type of meeting versus what you all are doing that does trigger it?
Yeah, so we can continue to use Marconi as an example. And that helped inform, what was a process that we wanted to have in place. So the Marconi project involved changing the roadway layout from two travel lanes in each direction to one travel lane in each direction. Generally, there were changes in that typical cross section at various points, such as intersections where the capacity was needed. So that kind of change would be a major operational change, which would lead us to host a community meeting about that project, where we would present both the conceptual design, the design direction that's being considered, and then take all the public feedback and input from that meeting and incorporate that into the design, where then at the pre-construction meetings, we come back and share with the public what was the feedback that we received and how did we incorporate that feedback into a final design for that project.
Okay. Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Druso, for bringing up that definition for what is a major change. Dan, we're experiencing that right now in Algiers when we talk about MacArthur and Holiday, right? So when you're taking away a lane of traffic, there are different expectations. And so my concern is too, when you talk about how y'all are trying to retool this with conceptual design and pre-construction meetings, is that y'all did a lot of outreach 6 months ago before construction had even started, right? So there was this lag time between any kind of public engagement and then implementation, right? And so I just feel that if y'all are going to retool how you're doing these type of community engagements, I think there needs to be a timeline in there as well. And there needs to be a better way of managing expectations on what y'all are doing, right? Because everybody is, you know, we know the polling data. We know the vast majority of the city are for protected bike lanes, right? Nobody wants to ride in traffic behind a bike. It's safer for everybody to get them out of there, but it means different things to different people. And right now there is a tremendous amount of consternation in Algiers for what's happening. And I think also another way to handle this too is you're hearing a lot about safety with these new implementations. And I think that needs to be addressed, as well as, I think safety needs to be primarily, and we know that that's why y'all are doing this, for safety, right? For safety for everybody. But I think that needs to kind of be more on the front end as we move forward. And I'm not so sure that has been. And so I think we really need to pay attention to that. And also in terms of traffic counts and those street studies, the traffic studies, there's a lot of concern that traffic studies have not been done. And so when something happens like what happened in Councilman Gerusso's district with Marconi, where they actually took away a lane of traffic, and what's happening now at MacArthur and Holiday, that's the same kind of process. And so the public really needs to understand what the thinking is and what kind of traffic studies were done, right? And what that methodology was, especially if you're looking at methodology into the future. Because what I'm hearing people's concern about is that, well, it's fine now. Yeah, we don't have much traffic, but what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How is that going to affect it? How is this being affected during rush hour? We know that there's not traffic during the day, but what happens during rush hour, and when are you doing the traffic studies? So I think there needs to be a greater level of communication when we talk about the traffic studies as well. So I'm just going to turn it back over to you on this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councilmember. And I appreciate you summarizing that. We've heard many of the same things, and I think it has become clear that making sure that the communication is constant and consistent is important, and making sure particularly changes that people haven't necessarily seen before in their neighborhood, and particularly during the construction phase, I think has led to people being unsure as to what's happening or how it's going to work, translating from what they may have seen at the public meetings if they were involved, and how they're seeing it on the street itself. So we are definitely wanting to further improve the process and make sure that the communication and the information is being shared with our residents in as many ways as possible, so that if people have questions, they know where they can, when asked those questions, and get answers to those. On some of the points that you mentioned, we are around traffic counts, for example. The Department of Public Works, the Traffic Engineering Division, anytime there's going to be one of those major operational changes, as described in the policy, they are reviewing the traffic data, and they are ensuring that the capacity along that roadway is where it needs to be, and that the balance between safety and capacity is not causing the system to break down into complete dysfunction. So that is being done for these projects, and we see this often where congestion is most likely is at intersections that are signal or stop controlled. So using the MacArthur Boulevard and Holiday Drive projects as examples, the intersection of those two roadways remains 2 lanes in each direction coming into and out of that intersection. Because that signal is there and there's turning movements, that additional capacity of those lanes will make sure that the functioning of that intersection continues to flow smoothly for people that are driving, as well as for people that are walking and biking in that intersection. Whereas other segments of the corridor, based on the traffic volumes and linking to the safety question, the traffic speeds, the 2 lanes aren't necessary for the volumes that are present and really just contribute to allowing people to drive excessively fast on MacArthur Boulevard. 70% of vehicles were exceeding the posted speed limit of 35, which I think most people, and I think particularly the people living on MacArthur Boulevard, no one wants speeding traffic in front of their house all day. And MacArthur is primarily a residential street. So that's where it really links into that safety element. And I think you made a great point that making sure that the safety impacts are front and center all the time in these conversations are essential to make sure that the full perspective of why a project is happening, that it's not just about a bike lane here or parking lanes over here. It's about how they all operate together to improve the safety of the roadway for everyone that's using it. So
All right,
I think we're all working to the same goal.
Okay, and I'm also hearing that there's been concern that whether or not public safety agencies have been consulted regarding these bike lanes. So, we hear like for fire routes, is the turn radius still appropriate for ladder trucks? And have you consulted with the fire department, with EMS, with NOPD when these plans are made? That's another thing that we're talking about. Since you brought up safety, I wanted to reiterate that with you.
Yep, that kind of engagement, that kind of engagement has happened. I know that the question has come up and from the community as to like how that's going to work. And generally, there are single lane divided streets all around the city. And they are able to meet the needs of our emergency services. And, we have no expectation that anything about these projects are going to change the ability for whether it be NOPD or NOFD or EMS to be able to perform their jobs and get to locations. But that said, DPW is still monitoring the projects after they're complete to make sure that there aren't unexpected issues that come up across any of these items that we've discussed, whether it's in relation to emergency access or in relation to school pickup lines or operations at an intersection. So if something unexpected does develop, DPW is monitoring those projects and they will spot that and then be able to correct it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So turning back to the slide that I think is still on screen around the community engagement updates. I think we were in the middle there. So communications around these meetings are conducted through a combination of avenues, including via the Neighborhood Engagement Office and their established mailing lists with civic associations and with individual residents, through postcards that are mailed to addresses along a project corridor and to addresses within 2 blocks of a project corridor, via social media and via the city's calendar online. And then all the content from these meetings are available on the city's website at nola.gov/transportation so that people can download them ahead of time and follow through the presentations during the meeting itself, or if they're unable to attend at the time of the virtual meeting, they'll be able to access all the materials at their convenience. They will remain online in perpetuity. Next slide, please, Paul. So turning to the working group. So I mentioned before that we'll be convening on May 19th and have a combination of public sector entities and community stakeholders serving on that working group. And this is the list of those entities: capital projects, city planning, the Office of Economic Development, the New Orleans Health Department, Office of Human Rights and Equity, the Advisory Council for Persons with Disabilities, Neighborhood Engagement, Parks and Parkways, NOPD, Department of Public Works, RTA, Roadwork NOLA, the sewer and water board, excuse me, I'm trying to combine words, sewerage and water board, the Office of Youth and Families, AARP Louisiana, the Complete Streets Coalition, Lighthouse Louisiana, and the University of New Orleans Transportation Institute. Next slide. So some of the initial tasks that we're envisioning for the working group, starting with that May 19th meeting, is items that were identified in the policy where we felt particularly that the broad perspective that the working group could bring from different stakeholders would really be the best way to establish some of these items. And that includes a definition of equity and its relationship to complete streets. We really don't want equity to just be a buzzword that is talked about. We really want to make sure that we're defining it in a way that it is relevant to the issues, relevant to complete streets, and is something that we can implement towards and measure the implementation towards. Speaking of those measurements, then the other big task will be recommending metrics and an evaluation framework for complete streets generally, and again, bringing it back, that making sure that those metrics and that framework are looking at things through an equity lens so that we can really address populations within the city and neighborhoods within the city that historically have been underinvested in from a transportation perspective, and make sure that moving forward, we're developing transportation systems and networks that provide our residents with affordable and safe transportation options. And then the final major task here at the front end will be developing an annual work plan for the working group. So we've identified these initial tasks, but what else does the work group as a whole want to pursue during the remainder of 2021 to develop recommendations to be shared with the Department of Public Works. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions from you, Councilmember Druso or Palmer, or any of the other council members.
Well, Dan, I want to say thank you for the presentation, and I'm glad to hear the May 19th date is coming up, and that we'll have a group of people looking at all these issues. I guess the other thing, just from my perspective, is you have a hard job because I know you're trying to establish some comprehensive, consistent policies, but then there's going to be things that are specific based on where you are. And so I don't welcome that challenge, because I know it's not easy, because what happens in one part of the city is very different than what happens somewhere else. But I appreciate the fact that you, Laura, and others are rolling up your sleeves to get that started. And you know, that in particular, we're having good conversations about public meetings, how they're occurring, that they're happening, that people are going to have 2 opportunities to weigh in, as you've described. I think having more engagement, even though it involves more time and more listening, I think ultimately leads to better results. So I appreciate that too. I do know we have comments. Paul, is this where we have about the roughly 40 comments right now?
We've got a few over 30 on this one.
Okay. Would you mind reading those?
No problem.
Thank you.
First comment is from Kathleen St. Germain. If complete streets is purported to be about increasing road safety, why is it that dangers associated with complete streets Vision Zero alterations to city streets being ignored? During the Barron Street experiment in 2018, drivers registered troubling concerns about the limited ability for drivers to view traffic crossing in front of them in intersections because of the move of vehicle traffic lanes beyond a bike lane and a parking lane from the curb. This, plus the concern of drivers having to exit their cars into moving lanes of traffic and then having to walk through bike lanes, which are allowed to carry e-bikes that can travel up to 20 miles per hour, to access sidewalks and businesses, the backing up of drivers from garages that must pass through a bike lane and a park lane to enter the vehicle lane, and the unacceptable increase of streets blocking emergency rescue vehicles in traffic because, in all but a few cases, removing a vehicle lane will leave no lane for drivers to move over to let emergency vehicles pass in stalled traffic. All of these, all but ignored, problems are exponentially more dangerous in high-density, high-trafficked areas such as the CBD and warehouse districts, downtown, and should only be allowed, if at all, in less dense parts of the city. Mary Wrigley. I'm appalled with the federal money being spent to inconvenience 98% of the residents. We are not uptown, downtown, mid-city, or lakefront where we have businesses and recreational places people want to bike to. Our community has its grocery stores, fast food, and gas stations, enough to support our community, which we use our cars to get to. 95% of workers do not work within 1 mile area where using a bike to get to and from work is feasible. So why did you spend money to inconvenience us? We had bike lanes before, which there were no complaints about. This has caused an eyesore to our neighborhoods for an unnecessary need, and for what? You also didn't ask the residents if they felt it was needed. There were no vote from the people, and our councilman did a horrible job notifying the public. You cannot use a social media platform for 25,000 people when only 0.05% may see it. We can be bombarded with trash mail when elections are coming around, but when something that is important as this, you hid it from us and then ignore anyone who is opposing. It seems you didn't want our opinion, and that's why you went ahead with it, because you knew the majority would object to this. We would have suggested using neutral grounds or just repair our roads so we can bike around our neighborhoods. What I'm most upset about is who is doing this job. On the truck panel, it showed Covington, Louisiana. So in a city where federal dollars could have helped, you decided to have an outside contractor benefit. John R. McGaugh. The whole bicycle on the streets concept.
Paul, I'm sorry, I missed it. Where was that resident from?
She did not state her neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
John R. McGaha. The whole bicycle on the streets concept is riddled with safety, traffic congestion, and business impact issues. It failed the first time. Do not try to do it again. Melanie Owen. Removing lanes of traffic on downtown streets will only add to the automobile congestion, parking and flow, ingress and egress to businesses and residences. Yenny Carranza. Hope you all have a good day. With this bike lanes project in Algiers, how come you have the Complete Streets project and are taking away one already existing traffic lane on MacArthur and Holiday? We are asking for the bike lanes to be reconsidered. Replanning is needed. Yes to safe bike lanes. No to take away our vehicle driving lanes. God bless you, Yenny Carranza. Nanette Babin. I know that my comment will have no impact on your decision on the bike lanes on Howard Avenue, but I have the need to voice my opinion. I have been here at this location for 53 years. If you reduce our driving lanes on Howard, I will not be able to receive deliveries any longer. There is a loading lane at the end of the street, but there is not enough room for the big trucks also. Most of the time, these no parking lanes are taken up by residents in this area since there is no parking for them. I feel like I'm being pushed out the city and being forced to move my business to a different parish. I have a furniture store, and the trucks will not be able to access my building because there will only be one lane for cars to pass. I'm requesting to please do not put these bike lanes on Howard Avenue. My deliveries will not be able to be made. Denise Davila, to whom it may concern. I'm writing in regards to the work conducted by the Complete Streets program in the Algiers area. There has been a considerable amount of disapproval surrounding the project. A petition has been circulated amongst community members, which has now collected over 750 signatures of local residents. The project has come with a variety of problems that are impacting the community. Amongst the concerns individuals have expressed include safety of parking vehicles in the middle of MacArthur Boulevard, the loss of street parking for individuals living closer to Holiday Drive and the Winn-Dixie Shopping Plaza, increased vehicular traffic during the key peak drive times, AM and PM, inability for emergency vehicles to access a destination along the route, impact to Namtok and its parade route, potential decrease of home values impacted by decreased street parking on MacArthur Boulevard, and more. With the negative feedback from the community, it has become apparent that the City Office of Transportation and other involved parties do not do their due diligence in properly informing the project to the community, including the true scope of the project and the considerable changes that have been made to our infrastructure. Other concerns that have been raised include maintenance of the bike lanes, with visible litter and debris already gathering in the narrow lanes. Further on the above, the organization, Bike Easy, has communicated to various civic association groups that the above changes were put in place to accommodate 8 bikes a day, according to their study, a number which, compared to the vehicular traffic for MacArthur Boulevard, 16,000 vehicles a day, amounts to a 0.05%. One can see why there has been such negative response to this project. I ask that the council at large take into account the voice of its constituents who truly live, work, and commute in Algiers and consider a more feasible solution for its residents. Thank you for your time and consideration. Teresa Troth. Bike lanes creating havoc in peaceful neighborhoods. I do not believe that our community needs or wants the proposed bike lanes on every major street in our community. I foresee many lives being placed in danger due to these bike lanes. Examples would include first responders not being able to get to those in need of their services, increased road rage, drivers using neighborhood streets to avoid traffic congestion on the major roadways, thus putting our children at risk. I am not opposed to bike lanes, but the current plan is a disaster waiting to happen. Why can't bike lanes be located on the neutral grounds of our streets? Paul Papura. I do not object to bike lanes. However, the redesign of MacArthur Boulevard in Algiers is terrible, as is the loss of the turn lane at Holiday and General de Gaulle. I'm seeing traffic congestion I've never experienced in almost 14 years I've traveled daily on MacArthur. And I understand the NOFD has experienced some challenges in maneuvering a ladder truck on MacArthur, making this a public safety issue. I urge the city to not move forward with redesign plans for Woodland Drive and General Meyer Avenue. There are far too few bicyclists in Algiers to justify these redesigns. These might work in neighborhoods such as Bywater, Faubourg Marigny, and in some cases uptown. But Algiers, and specifically MacArthur Boulevard, thank you for your time. Anthony Favor. The Office of Transportation has repeatedly used push polling in trying to avoid opposition to the siting of bike lanes and the reduction of vehicle lanes. It has used push polling and pedestrianization efforts in the French Quarter to such a degree it needed to completely redo the poll. It is not interested in public comment when it comes to their push to inconvenience the drivers who represent more than 80% of the population of the city. Any lane reduction or parking space reduction on the street should have a notification sign, much like a zoning change, that allows the stakeholders to comment on the plans. The Transportation Department has been trying to push through changes in street capacity as quietly as possible to avoid the motoring public a chance to comment. And what this has resulted in is communities like Algiers suddenly finding themselves with lane amputations of streets like MacArthur and provoking a backlash. Any siting of new bike lanes or reconfiguring of existing bike lanes should primarily attempt to avoid any lane reductions or on-street parking space reductions. But in the case of a street like Paris or Marconi, where a space for a bike lane with no lane reduction, the Transportation Department has either planned or implemented them anyway. The entire Moving New Orleans Bikes framework needs to be reconsidered in light of the push poll used to design it and its attempt to sideline the vast majority of street users. Bikes should be encouraged to take advantage of our mostly intact street grid and use secondary and side streets for their trips. In no way should major street capacity be reduced for this project. Additionally, if any of the Transportation Department is working or leading a bike lobbying organization, this would represent a conflict of interest. Brenda Fortmayer. The diagrams presented by the city did not label a one vehicle travel lane, one parking lane, one bicycle lane on General MacArthur Boulevard. It was dishonestly portrayed to the residents. 12,000 cars each day travel this street. The intersection at Holiday and MacArthur is a mess. Residents have lost their safe curbside parking. Please fix this. Brad Ott. Members of the Joint Public Works Transportation Committee meeting. Thank you for this opportunity to address the bike lane and street reconfigurations in Algiers. Due to the apparent lack of public notice, the MacArthur Boulevard reconfiguration to support inclusion of protected bike lanes has taken away otherwise legal on-street parking spaces for cars, especially between Holiday and Cable, made exiting the Winn-Dixie Algiers Plaza much harder for larger vehicles, and has engendered much neighborhood anger toward bicyclists, even as we have gained positive street spacing. Furthermore, the lack of signage alerting the vehicle lane merge on MacArthur past Cable Drive eastbound is a hazardous situation needing immediate attention, as well as look both ways stop signage on MacArthur from Holiday to General de Gaulle. Looming on the residential section of Holiday Drive between Vixen and Copernicus Streets is another road diet that will reduce what has been a 4-lane boulevard with a road-marked bike lane and curbside parking to one traffic lane in each direction, and a parking bicycle reconfiguration similar to what happened on MacArthur between Algiers Plaza and Woodland Drive. Since Holiday Drive is the only major north-south bound boulevard directly connected to a high-speed boulevard coming from Jefferson Parish, LA 428, Major 4-lane feeder streets on either side, e.g. MacArthur, Commercial Holiday, and General Meyer, as well as the lack of direct notice to residents and their imminent reconfiguration of on-street parking. I am requesting that this reconfiguration not move forward until a better accommodations, alternative roadway lanes with motor vehicles and bicycles can be provided for. Specifically, rather than a MacArthur-style bike parked vehicle separation, have a Pace Boulevard-style buffered bike lane that would enhance distance from driver's side car door openings while still preserving a second lane, traffic lane, and curbside parking for residents. Originally, I wholeheartedly supported the New Orleans Complete Streets upgrade for bicyclists and pedestrians in Algiers, especially along Lawrence Street, Berman Park, Odeon Avenue, Old Berman Highway, Garden Oaks Drive, Wall Boulevard, and the paving of the top of the river levee from Odeon to the Chalmette Ferry. All of these have been vast improvements, making the streets vastly safer over the past year. Likewise, older buffered bike lanes on Pace Boulevard and the lanes on Shirley Drive I also regularly utilize as an avid bicyclist. I also support the enhanced bike lane separations on and along the commercial parts of Holiday Drive, where there have been a designated bicycle lane, as well as across General Meyer toward Berman Place. During a Complete Streets bike ride in late 2020, I also experienced riding on Newton Street between Berman Avenue and the river. Though I like the bike lanes as a bicyclist, I remain concerned regarding the loss of on-street parking. Likewise, during another bike ride on Old Berman Highway, numerous cars have blocked the bike lanes. While the bike lanes there make riding along Old Berman much safer, no apparent accommodation was made for area residents long accustomed to parking along the road, including but not limited to marking a parking lane on the opposite side of Old Berman where such curbside parking could be safely and amply afforded. Having two transportation vehicles, bicycle and SUV, and having served a previous life as a delivery driver and a French Quarter resident, I am keenly concerned that these remarkable enhancements afforded by Complete Streets for bicyclists and pedestrians joggers, that we not forget people who also need to park their vehicles as close as possible to their destination, including their homes, and any others, including businesses, need to be afforded while enhancing safety for all. And such road diet reconfiguration demand proper advanced public notification, such as regularly occurs with other road projects. Natalie Nunley. Let's see. The design of the bike lanes in MacArthur is unsafe and unnecessary. We need both lanes on that street and Woodland due to traffic and school pickup. I've lived here 15 years and rarely ever see bicycles along these routes. I'm not opposed to bike lanes, just the loss of the vehicle lane and the way it was implemented. And we need signs. It's dangerous. The paved levee is awesome. Ellie Darlene Giat. The bike lanes belong in the neutral grounds, not in the street. Barring that, put them in the servitude area where grass is now. Someone is going to get killed with the goofy, idiotic setup you all put in. This should have been voted on, not crammed down our throats. The Complete Streets this comment is from David Wadley. The Complete Streets Coalition is made up of bicycle advocates who are simply not able to understand or represent the concerns of Algiers residents and vehicle operators within their bicycle-centric view of a good plan. Their plans, contrary to their statements, are not improvements for anyone except bicycle riders. Take any poll or vote of all the affected residents in our neighborhoods, and you can confirm this is true. Claims of traffic calming are hysterically false, and what we have seen instead is road rage and vehicles burning more gas to take alternate routes around the roads they have ruined for vehicles, routes which the city soon plans to deconstruct the same way. The idea that deconstructing an expensively built 4-lane road into a half-capacity 2-lane road with narrow lanes at that is a benefit to all of us is ludicrous. This is simply the city avoiding enforcing existing traffic laws to make our roads safe in preference to creating roads we can't drive safely on in hopes it forces drivers to slow down. Evacuations of all kinds will be hampered. Emergency vehicles are hampered. If the city does as it always has and takes weeks or months to repair the only travel lane left after subsidence or sewage ward work creates a car-destroying hole in the road, drivers will have no option but to wreck their cars going through it. There is no longer an option to change lanes around a dangerous hole, or even to move a bit in the lane to one side or the other. We already pay about $900 annually per vehicle more in maintenance costs than drivers in other cities do. due to the city not maintaining the roads well. Complete Streets is misnamed, as actually they are making our streets less complete from every perspective except that of bicycle riders. Complete Streets promotes riding bicycles without helmets in their prominent website artwork, but lectures us on the need for us all to make sacrifices for the safety of bicycle riders, who are very few in number. What bicycle riders there are often ignore the rules of the road, including bike lanes anyway. Their plans are so strongly biased against cars at all that the city should be halting all work and starting over so that all voices can be heard. Traffic and safety needs more than colorful paint and the nuisance of lane delineators. Traffic safety needs actual policing and physical traffic stops made by officers. Everyone in Algiers knows better than to drive dangerously or carelessly anywhere in Gretna. By the same token, except for camera tickets, which don't even result in loss of driving privileges, aggressive drivers in Orleans Parish know they can do pretty well anything they dare on the roads, and the odds of being pulled over are near zero. Those drivers who are risk takers have already begun to zoom through the parking lanes, passing cars on the right and dangerously cutting in front of them just before the next lane delineator. There is none of the traffic calming effect of promised stress-free commute in Algiers. Instead, we have road rage and frustrated, confused drivers. Even for bicycles, there's no safety found in hiding behind a PVC lane delineator. When a drunk someday wanders into the bike lane and mows down a row of cyclists, those delineators offer no protection, only the illusion of protection. The chief feature of the Complete Streets plan is that the city doesn't have to spend hardly any money on traffic enforcement or road construction, while drivers and owners of parked cars get their vehicles used as protective barriers and have to bear all the insurance and repair costs of being used as cannon fodder in this plan. We and our vehicles are used as hostages to slow others. We all know that true bicycle safety involves getting bicycles off the roads and onto independent paths like the levee trail. But this is just another of the many nice things the city can't afford to do properly, like repairing our roads or traffic law enforcement. The next comment is from Patricia Hayes. The bike lanes on MacArthur are, as constructed, are so wrong for that residential street boulevard where a huge, wide neutral ground could have been used for everyone's safety and for aesthetics. The project is ugly and offers some safety issues for cars already happening. Cars are now weaving in and out of parking lanes to overtake cars in passing. Trash containers are being emptied by Richards and thrown into bike lanes instead of being placed back on grass easement. Trash is accumulating in bike lanes with no plan as to who is to clean them. Backing out of driveways on MacArthur residents is now more challenging, especially with boats and trailers. The road that has commerce for development of business and straight shot to the point is General Meyer, which lacks even sidewalks. I understand it was not in contention because it is a state road, but maybe the city should work with the state on this. It is a pedestrian nightmare. The plan for MacArthur is wrong for the street. The residents affected were not consulted with individual outreach as one would expect. We have lost an opportunity to bring some beauty with bike path and nice native planting to that neutral ground. Algiers needs beautification and attention. Napoleon Avenue is what would have worked if anyone cared to do more than plop down a bike lane. We have been ignored and lost again by doing something on the cheap. It is very disappointing to the community and reinforces the always present feeling that we matter less. It just fuels the call for our own council district separate from the French Quarter, or for leaving Orleans Parish altogether and joining Jefferson Parish, which maybe geographically is where we really belong. The next comment is from Jackie Jones. I am 100% for bike lanes. I am 100% against the new bike lane configuration on MacArthur Boulevard in Algiers. I have ridden through New Orleans to look at the bike lanes, and it appears that MacArthur in the only residential area with barriers in front of houses. In addition, I did not see any residential streets with the same setup as ours. Bike lane, barrier, parking lane, driving lane. I do realize that Marconi Drive has this setup. I work at Delgado City Park, but the barriers are not obstructing any houses on Marconi, and I think Marconi is wider than MacArthur Boulevard. In fact, the bike setup does not extend across City Park Avenue to Orleans Avenue, where there are houses. Since the barriers have been put up, I am having a harder time backing out of my driveway. I must now wait longer since there is only one lane, and I must make a much wider turn into the driving lane in order to avoid the barrier next to my driveway. My son was almost hit by a car that went around him on the right side in the new parking lane while he was trying to turn right into our driveway from a driving lane. MacArthur Boulevard does not have a large number of bikers that warrants this setup. I have driven down Esplanade, does not have a lot more. Sorry, I have driven down Esplanade, which does have a lot more bike activity, and they do not have the same setup as ours. Also, I understand that this is to protect bikers. I would like to know the number of bikers injured on MacArthur Boulevard, not including those injured at the intersection of Holiday and MacArthur Boulevard, where many wrecks occur because drivers and bikers do not stop at the red light. I have lived on MacArthur Boulevard for 35 years, and I have put up with the increased traffic, noise, trash, lights, and flooding due to the large shopping center across the street from my home, all of which have lowered our property values. It is very hard to sell a house on this block. With the new protective barriers, I truly believe that our property values will drop further. Also, I feel barricaded in my property. My neighbors will be losing all of their street parking. Now, I also rode down Gentilly Boulevard between Elysian Fields and Franklin Avenue, where the residents do not have parking lanes in front of their houses due to bike lanes. Many of these houses have circle driveways. The other concern with the new configuration is parking next to the driving lane and opening the door to get out and carry groceries or other bags from the backseat or trunk, or worse, trying to get a baby or child out of the back seat on the driver's side. Also, I'm afraid to park there or have my family members park there, since there is a greater chance their car will get hit now. Also, I do not know where delivery trucks or maintenance trucks will park. My other concern is how will residents be notified of the new bike lane, driving lane rules? We have residents from Plaquemine Parish utilize our roads to get across the river. Michelle Flemings. The improvements made at Holiday and MacArthur red light turning lane is horrible, insane, and reckless. This doesn't fix the accident problems, but increases it. How are we supposed to turn right at this light if the turning lane is blocked? When making improvements to a neighborhood, residents of the community should be informed and agree before any permanent changes. Fix the streets in Algiers because the state received their property taxes. Winnie Troth. My main concern is EMS, fire, and police. What happens during an emergency? Two neighborhoods becoming congested with traffic. 3, looks ridiculous. Home values will drop. 4, school children pickup is greatly affected. 5, limiting parking guests for those homes that live along the bike path. Who decided on this anyway? Chris Reed. I appreciate the complete streets additions of bike lanes. I am appalled at the dismal rollout of this program on MacArthur. They added the striping over a month ago and still haven't put up any signage about what to do where. It has been needlessly confusing and has poisoned the well against the project. Cars are still parking on the bike lanes. Cars are driving through the parking spots angrily where there aren't any plastic poles. Please provide education and the volume to capacity ratio, traffic speed and traffic density and travel times before and after these projects. Jennifer McGowan. New Orleans. Please reconsider the safety of the residents and traffic flow before you change any additional streets to a single lane. It impedes emergency vehicles and there is no long-term maintenance plan. Phyllis Waiters LaCure. The dangerous position I was placed in last week with only one lane in the 4,000 block of MacArthur when an emergency vehicle was approaching and I had nowhere to go. Traffic was backed up while people were trying to turn into the Winn-Dixie parking lot. Please have someone do an on-site visit to this terrible situation, preferably Helena Moreno. Thank you. Debbie Fredrickson. Algiers is a suburb of New Orleans without many businesses. Most people who live in Algiers travel out of their subdivision to attend work and are unable to ride a bike to their place of employment. The bike lanes on MacArthur Boulevard are a nuisance visually and hinder safety of the homeowners. Fire trucks are no longer able to make U-turns. With only one lane, there is nowhere to get out of the way of any emergency vehicle. Being a suburb, bikes are ridden on the streets in the subdivision for enjoyment. Serious bike riders speed on the river road on top of the levee. I am not against bike lanes by any means, but the configuration used on MacArthur is extremely unsafe. Before any more bike lanes, which are full of debris making them dangerous, are erected, there needs to be conversation with professional engineers and homeowners. Kay Jordan. I have lived on the corner of Holiday and Copernicus since 1978. Most cars turning north on Holiday run the stop sign. If I am backing out of my driveway when that happens, there is no place to move to avoid an accident if the bike sticks are there. I have already turned left on MacArthur from Holiday and was forced onto the concrete pad. I ride my bike every day that weather permits and have avoided Holiday and MacArthur because of dangerous neighborhoods. I am thankful that the levee is paved now. I disapprove of the new lanes. Joseph Pierre, New Orleans. It may be too late to change what's already been done, but I spoke at one of the meetings when they were introducing this project. I objected for the same reason most are objecting now. It clogs up one of the passages to the East Bank. With RTA and school buses on the streets, it does not work for us on these streets. Dana Purpura. I would request that the city halt all bike lane changes in Algiers until actual residents of Algiers can have their voices heard. Most of these changes, especially along MacArthur Boulevard, are not appropriate for a residential area. The white posts and marking configuration should have not been installed on a neighborhood street. Not only does it limit homeowners' ability to park, it is an eyesore that will negatively impact property values. A member of the local fire department has stated that the white posts and new configuration is causing difficulties for the fire department to navigate and turn their ladder trucks on MacArthur Boulevard. This will impact public safety and possibly insurance ratings for this area. We are not against bike lanes. We are against this inappropriate design for our neighborhood. William Merritt. Thanks for trying to enhance bicycle safety in Algiers. I have been riding bikes on MacArthur and other Algiers streets since the early 70s, and I think the recent changes increase the dangers associated with bicycling and should be reversed or at least modified. With the bike lanes and the curbs, cyclists are forced to navigate through the most littered portions of the road, as that's where everything gets pushed to. No amount of maintenance will make these lanes debris free. The accumulation of acorns alone make this hazardous area of the road for cyclists. After a hard rain, this is also where the water accumulates by design. No one over age 13 likes riding their bikes through these deep puddles. Prior to the restriping, I would avoid cycling anywhere near the curb. I still will if there are no cars around. If we keep a bike lane, which I oppose, I recommend redesigning the configuration by returning the parking lane to its original location, keeping the left lane for cars, and using the right lane for bikes with a buffer split on either side of the bike lane to provide a safe zone for both passing vehicular traffic and opening doors and parked cars. I personally had no problem riding a bike on MacArthur before the prior bike lane on the right was added or after it was added, but I will avoid cycling MacArthur if I can if the current system remains. It is inherently dangerous to have a two-way bike lane on any one-way street. You just can't expect 100% of the drivers to look both ways when crossing a traditionally one-way street. Someone will die. The city realized and corrected this mistake in the CBD, so I don't know why it did not learn from that mistake here. Please require the cyclist to ride in the same direction as the rest of the universe. Also inherently dangerous is facilitating cyclists with a means by which they can cross General de Gaulle at Holiday to proceed down Berman Highway. Cyclists have no business riding on the interstates, major bridges, and extremely busy state highways such as de Gaulle and Berman. Cyclists should be banned from such highways. Where are they going to go once they get on Berman? If they really need to get to the few businesses on the other side of de Gaulle, they can safely walk their bikes across the street in the crosswalk. Please remove all the bicycle striping, etc. from the entire intersection. Giselle Scheck-Snyder. As a resident of MacArthur Boulevard, I don't understand how this project has been properly communicated to directly affected residents, as I was caught by surprise when the new bike lanes were installed, just like many of my neighbors. I have a one-car driveway and I just discovered I lost my one on-street parking. The new bike lanes are not safer than the ones we had before. On the contrary, they present more risks of a bicyclist not being seen by drivers, as they are now hidden behind parked vehicles when entering a driveway, backing out of it, or making a right turn. The flexi poles are usually installed in non-residential areas. They don't age well. The boulevard reduced to one traffic lane each way is an additional hazard. How are emergency vehicles going to reach destination without being slowed down by traffic backups and no way to move to the side to let them proceed? It appears that fire trucks and ladders can no longer turn on MacArthur because of this terrible design. There are two schools around the corner on Eaton Street. Carpool parents lined up on MacArthur along several blocks and will have to go around parked cars into the one traffic lane to move forward. How is that safe? Why create extra traffic blocks? With our previous bike lane, there has been no accident involving cyclists on the boulevard. If the purpose is to force cars to reduce speed, there are other proven ways than penalizing the majority for the irresponsibility of the few. A bike lane in our neutral ground would isolate riders from cars and also oblige them to stop at intersections. In the city, I see more riders out of their lane, going against traffic, ignoring stops and traffic lights. I wish safety improvements would be focused on more pressing priorities first instead of creating more issues. Respectfully. Ursel Staples. I'm writing to ask that you look into when repairs are scheduled to be done in the 27 and 2800 blocks of Chelsea Drive in Algiers. I've been living here since 2001. My neighbors and I have been told that the repairs, road construction projects have been pending since approximately 2009, although I recall being told that damages were reported as early as 2000, when the extent of the damage wasn't as bad as it is currently. I appreciate the work that has been done to accommodate bikers in our area, as saving residents from injury or possibly loss of life is important. Care for and attention to the condition of our streets and underlying infrastructure is of utmost importance as well. The condition of our streets affect the foundation of our homes, our vehicles, and joggers who choose to run in the streets. It's also a complete embarrassment. I've often shrugged off the horrible conditions of our streets by saying to visitors, it's the cost I pay for living in our wonderful city. However, this recent expenditure on bike lanes is a huge slap in the face for me because 12 to 20 years is a long time to wait for just about anything. I don't begrudge money being spent on the improvement for bikers. I just would have hoped that other quality of life issues like the disrepair of our streets would have come first. I am hopeful that addressing the street conditions is going to be a project that is coming to Chelsea Boulevard sooner rather than years later. I invite you to drive these 2 blocks and the surrounding areas so that you get to see firsthand the potholes, sinking streets, and raised manhole covers we have to navigate just to get to our homes. Next comment is from Martha Griffin. The bike lane project in Algiers is a disaster. Traffic on main roads has severe delays and backup of traffic. Taking over a complete driving lane on the main traffic areas makes for a slow and dangerous commutes for nearly all working residents. Turning lanes were removed, making it potentially very dangerous when turning right, as if a bicyclist is coming in that lane, a car could collide. Parking in the middle of the street on such narrow confinement means parked cars opening doors into traffic. We had medians that could have been used instead. Planning is poor and a detriment to our community, not to mention affects our property values negatively. Focus should have been placed on planning these bike lanes in areas where biking makes sense, near main parks, lakes, etc., not high vehicular commuter traffic areas. Brian Gussman. I work for the fire department, and due to the new bike lanes installed on MacArthur Boulevard, our fire trucks can no longer make U-turns on this street, which will impact our response times. There are also locations such as right in front of Winn-Dixie that we cannot take a left turn with a fire truck because what used to be a driving lane is now a parking spot. It's necessary to have that lane opened and not parked on so as to be able to make that turn. Come see for yourself, please, so that you can see how this configuration impacts our department. Look all the way down MacArthur and ask yourself sincerely if you think this bike lane configuration is conducive for easy first responder access. It's not. It only makes it harder to access and maneuver around MacArthur Boulevard. Anthony McGinn. I'm very concerned about the proposed bike lanes in the Barron O'Keefe corridor. A few years ago, temporary bike lane structures were installed in the 100 block of Barron. I noticed many unsafe situations resulting from the experiment. Pedestrians are used to looking out for vehicular traffic in the street. Some were caught unawares and were nearly run over by bicycles approaching in the dedicated lane, which was placed next to the curb. I'm also concerned about the congestion that would occur if the street were limited to one lane of vehicular traffic. There is considerable congestion in the 100 block of Barron in peak seasons for the Roosevelt Hotel. Access could be blocked if there were only one lane for vehicular traffic. Similarly, when there are large events in the Immaculate Conception Church, there would be congestion which would block the street if there were only one lane for vehicular traffic. I suggest keeping the present pattern where bike lanes are marked in the street. It would provide flexibility. A street with rigid barriers does away with flexibility. 3 more comments on this item. The next one is from Melville Williams. The new roadway design on MacArthur Boulevard to protect bicyclists caught everyone by surprise. So I fully understand the frustration expressed by residents because I too am frustrated. I'm not aware of this design anywhere else in the city and have never seen it advertised or promoted on any news media. If this is supposed to be a best practice model, we should have been introduced to this pre-implementation and given an opportunity to recommend other creative alternatives, or at the very least presented with guidelines and instructions. There's got to be a better design that would protect bicyclists and not be so disruptive to residents and drivers. Gilbert Crowden. The residents of Algiers is demanding to have an in-person meeting with the transportation director to discuss the bike lanes on MacArthur Boulevard. Mary Meising Gubala. If you look at the complete streets maps of proposed bike lanes, they are excessive given the percentage of people in our city who are and can physically be bike riders. Case in point, the proposed Marconi type bike lane, curb bike lane parking, reduced number of traffic lanes, neutral ground on Bienville is 1.5 blocks from the designated bike path on the Lafitte Greenway and 5 blocks from the bike lanes on Banks. This type of bike lane reduces the number of available parking spaces and restricts the space availability to access one's driveway if you are lucky enough to have one. When there is only one driving lane due to road diets, a neutral ground on the left and parked cars on the right, how can EMS, firefighters, or police get to their destinations in a timely fashion? What is to be done in case of an accident, breakdown, or ever-present potholes that sometimes span an entire lane? Additionally, not everyone is able to ride bikes. Transportation of the elderly and disabled must also be considered. And contrary to the rhetoric, the Marconi type bike lane impairs the view of pedestrians and bike riders when trying to cross the bike lane. These objections have been repeatedly voiced at meetings and appear to be repeatedly ignored. We have 2 more comments. I'm sorry, one was submitted by Anthony McGinn and I read his already. This one is from Michael Duplantier. To the Council of the City of New Orleans, I direct these advanced comments on the Complete Streets Annual Report to be presented later today to the combined City Council, Public Works, and Transportation Committees. The public participation options available during the meeting under the online format are too limited and unduly constrain an opportunity for the public to comment. So I'd ask that these public comments be made part of that meeting record. I join with many of my downtown neighbors, residents, property owners, and businesses in strong opposition to the Moving New Orleans Bikes plans for downtown New Orleans streets proposed by the city administration and the Department of Public Works. These proposals are unnecessary and counterproductive, arguably represent a radical redesign of those important streets, and are an unwanted and complicated traffic configuration that promises to harm and ill-serve those who have the most interest and stake in efficient downtown traffic movement. For some time now, reasonable, sound, and well-founded objections have been lodged against these plans, but little or no response to consideration has been offered by administration and department officials. The dogged intentionality with which these plans have been pursued, despite recurrent objections from those citizens and businesses most affected, suggests to me that this is not so much a transportation plan as it is a transportation ideology that is proposed for implementation, an ideology dismissive of opposition and of contrary evidence as to its alleged efficacy. As proposed, it does not represent sound transportation planning or policy. Other cities have implemented these forms of street plans with the promise of enhanced safety and have found that the supposed safety dividend has not been realized. See the recent correspondence of my colleague Kathleen St. Germain providing evidence of that unsubstantiated claim. In addition, there is mounting anecdotal evidence that these redesigns can and do affect difficult and sometimes dangerous unintended consequences. The pending Sewage and Water Board storm water retention construction plans will forestall any implementation of these plans for downtown for several months. With the benefit of this delay, I request that the City Council by resolution affirmatively direct the City Administration and the Department of Public Works to suspend all current complete streets or Moving New Orleans Bikes planning for downtown, that they promptly undertake a comprehensive top-to-bottom review of the proposed transportation plans for downtown New Orleans and actively and objectively consider alternatives to those plans, and that they be further mandated to meaningfully and respectfully engage all interested citizens who would be impacted by these plans and to the entirety of that review process. I seek your earnest consideration of this request. That's the last comment on this item.
Thank you, Paul, for hanging in there. I appreciate you reading all of those. And I think it was important to hear all of them too. And I think reiterates, I see Councilmember Palmer shaking her head, reiterates what we're hearing when we go to neighborhood meetings and we're hearing from our constituents as we move around. And I guess, as we're talking about all of this too, one of the things, colleagues, I think we ought to be thinking about is as we have neighborhood meetings, and Dan, I see you popping back up too, is asking certain neighborhoods or whoever wants to, if we need to start having departments come in addition to neighborhood engagement, because I think hearing about what's going on, so many of the comments were about the West Bank, and then also there were some comments about Marconi and what's happened. I think it helps because it's not just us telling the departments what we're hearing, it's the departments actually hearing it firsthand. Councilmember Palmer, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that there's some really good comments. I'm hearing consistently about a push-pull that people are very concerned about. I really would like to see what that looks like, because that's genuine. That gives me pause when we talk about how this is being communicated with to the public. So that's not the first time I heard it. And signage, we heard a lot of that on these public comments. And my understanding is we have brought this consistently to the administration, and they have not installed the signage yet. Is that correct, Dan? And is that going to happen sooner rather than later? People out there are quite confused.
Yeah, so one thing that we've been trying to emphasize, that it is still an active construction zone. So people should be using the street, remembering and recognizing that. The permanent signage, according to the latest update, arrived on Friday. So it'll be installed over the next week or so. So that should resolve those concerns around the signage that'll be in place in the long run.
So I think it's really important for the people of Algiers to know that this project is not completed yet. But I think it's also important for the people of Algiers to know that when it is completed, if there are significant problems with it, that this administration is committed to fixing it and making it right. Dan?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and one of the things that I consistently have issues with, again, especially when it comes to the Algiers bike paths, is I don't think anybody likes the white. I've told you that. I mean, we all know nobody likes those white ballards. But also, I honestly think green paint would really be even more effective than a lot of the physical things that y'all are trying to implement, because I think it is such a visual cue for where people park, where the lanes are. And that's what we've seen when it's implemented in other cities successfully. That's what we've seen. And my concern here is that we're not doing that same type of thing and treatment that makes it so successful in other cities. And if we have a half whatever project, that's not going to be good for anybody, right? So we really need to pay attention to the design. And then after it's done, I just want the people of Algiers to know that that we've been consistently bringing these issues up to the administration, and that they are going out there repeatedly. And when this project is completed, we will be able to, if it has to be fixed, it will be fixed, right? And at the end of the day, we're talking about paint and concrete that can be moved.
Yeah, yes, and in terms of if people do have, we've heard, many of the same things that were just spoken about in those public comments of questions and confusions and frustrations. If people are observing and reporting that they're seeing congestion, similar to what we talked about in the truck presentation, the more specifics someone can provide about the details of where they're seeing it, what time of day, because public works staff, myself, and others, have been on site at the project to investigate, the issues that people have asked about or raised concerns about. And we're not always observing the same conditions that people are saying are happening. So the more details we can have about where and when people are observing things that they consider to be problems or concerns will be helpful in us being able to also observe it and document what's happening and figure out, how we can address those.
Thank you. Councilmember Banks, I saw you come on.
Joe, I'd heard you mention MacArthur and the comments on MacArthur and on Marconi, but I also want to chime in that I've got grave concerns about the downtown plan. And I know Mike DePlanche wrote a comment, but the fact is that there is problems, and I fully support the idea of having bike lanes, but I don't agree with the proposed locations that they have throughout the CBD and Central City. And no one has yet made me understand the correlation between the fact that speed kills and we insist on putting bike lanes on the streets that have the higher speed limits. Why can't the bike lanes be on the side streets that have a lower speed limit to start with? That just seems to be logical to me. If speed kills, and we know that it does, put the bike lanes on the streets that have a lower speed limit. And that just makes sense. So I am not opposed to bike lanes, but I'm certainly got challenges and issues with the proposed plans that are being bantered about now for Central City and the CBD. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Banks. And I'll just say, I know you've been extraordinarily consistent on that point. You've made it before, not just today too. All right, Dan, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Appreciate your time and the thoroughness of your presentation. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, Councilmember, if I could just answer Councilmember Banks' question. It's kind of there's two parts to that answer, I think. The first answer is, speed is a leading indicator about the number of crashes and the severity of crashes, and that those crashes involve anyone using the roadway, not just people that might be biking on a roadway. So the bike lanes are part of a design approach intended to reduce speeding traffic that endangers everyone, people walking, people biking, people driving. Secondly, about bike infrastructure on major roads is necessary because people riding bikes are trying to access the same destinations as anyone using other forms of transportation. The major roads are where stores are, there's where job centers are. So people still need to end up using those roads to be able to access their destinations. And in some cases, neighborhood roads do provide alternative routes. And the Moving New Orleans bike blueprint includes neighborhood or bicycle boulevards on lower traffic, lower volume, lower speed streets. But in other parts of the city, there's not alternative parallel routes that serve the transportation network needs. So we have the blueprint is a combination of both types of facilities depending on the needs to create a network in any particular neighborhood.
And Dan, I don't want to get into debate, but I understand that the major thoroughfares have the businesses, and obviously bikers should be able to participate and go and support those businesses also. But having them ride one block up the street and then walk to the store or walk to the venue, to me, does not seem to be that inconvenient when you are in the process of trying to save lives. And you just said that the side streets are, the traffic is slower on the side streets. So at the end of the day, it just makes sense to me. So we can debate the nuances, but the fact of the matter is that I think rational minds will agree having them on streets that have a lower speed limit makes sense. And if it requires somebody to walk a half a block to get to a venue, and it helps to save lives and also promotes bike safety, also promotes greenhouse gases being lowered, also helps with all the things that biking does promote, I don't think that's a bad compromise.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Dan. We appreciate your being here today. All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palmer, I know you have the last item today.
Yes, this will be quick. Council members, do y'all want to put it up on the screen? Who has it? Paul?
1 second, council member.
Right. Y'all, this is about pedal carriages, and we're going to have some further discussion about this. This is going to be for discussion only. So we're not going to vote on it because I think a couple offices, though my team briefed all the offices. I think there's some outstanding questions. So I'm going to go ahead and push it back for a vote for next transportation meeting. But I want y'all to kind of look at it because there's been some concern. People thought this was about pedicabs. It's not about pedicabs. It's not about the ones that are in the front in City Park. It's about pedal pubs, and y'all can see pictures of them right here. I want to state that they are illegal. They've always been illegal in the city of New Orleans. They are currently illegal. If we see them operating, they are operating illegally. And what that means is the city's not deriving any income from it, right? And it also means, even more importantly, that there's no regulation on the actual safety of these types of vehicles, right? And so, you know, when you put that in context, and if you put it in context of what's happening all over the country in terms of these types of vehicles and the safety hazards that they provide, then it's a problem, okay? So what is attached to this is a very simple, straightforward ordinance that defines pedal carriages, which are better known as pedal pubs, and prohibits them from operating as for-hire vehicles in New Orleans. So if they're already illegal, why do we need to have an ordinance that says they're illegal? Because there's no current definition within the code that explains that they're illegal, which then it can also mean that that's open for interpretation by a city department. And I think all of us, especially the district council members, know that often interpretation can be a problem. And so this clearly explains and clearly delineates the definition of why this is illegal, okay? So what you're seeing right now, these vehicles that are pictured on the screen, are fast becoming the norms in tourist areas around the country, but they raise a host of safety concerns, as well as adding yet another vehicle type to our already overcrowded streets, right? This is especially true in the French Quarter and in certain parts of downtown. Yes, we know that this could be a unique attraction in New Orleans and can maybe help with some of our visitors, but quite frankly, this could also be a negative impact, especially if you look at what's happening in the French Quarter with a lot of road construction in and around the area. So this is why we're doing it. I would like your support on it, but I also want to give y'all the benefit of having a few more conversations about it so you understand. And also, just as an aside, you know, when we worked on the pedicab legislation, it took over a year, right? So this is really, if any of y'all are interested in having this in your community, you're more than welcome to try to sit here and reframe and create that ordinance. And if you want, we can even run it through the this committee. But to be clear, it's going to take an incredibly long amount of time. It took over a year to get pedicabs legal. And that's because not only do you have to open up the chapter, but you have to really talk about the safety features of each of the vehicles, how they're going to operate, where they can operate. And also, just to maintain expectations, I would be opposed to having any of them operate within the French Quarter. I'm not sure about your other districts, but in the French Quarter, we just do not have the space or right now the enforcement, quite frankly, to be able to handle another business. We're going to circulate documents and news articles from around the country about the safety dangers of these, and also the added sound implications on some of these vehicles, just so you know what could potentially be out there. Because on the surface, yes, it does look like a good idea, but you'll see from other cities that it's not. Very similar to the duck boats that also came to this council many years ago that we had to also make illegal. And then that also turned into the right thing to do, especially considering the number of lives that had been lost on these duck boats / vehicles for in other cities and jurisdictions. So with that, if y'all have any questions or comments regarding these? No? All
No,
right.
I mean, I will say I met with somebody who was interested in this months ago, and I did express the issue you raised, Councilmember Palmer, about sound, because I know we've gotten complaints about party buses before, in particular. And so it seems to me that obviously if these are roaming through neighborhoods or have high amplified sound, I can see neighbors not liking that. So
Right.
how do we deal with that too?
Thank you. And let's be clear, they are illegal. So if you see them operating on the streets of New Orleans right now, they are operating at a cost of they're utilizing our city infrastructure. They're not paying the city for any type of permitting. And they're actually taking away from folks that are like tour guides that are doing it legally, pedicabs that are doing it legally. So it's also just not fair all the way around for people to be operating illegally in this city. And I think even with this discussion we were having about bike lanes, we're looking at new infrastructure going on throughout the city. Now is not a good time to introduce another form of vehicle. Now, with that being said, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, or maybe in New Orleans East, if you would like them there, or Joe in your district, then you could, create that ordinance, and you can create a definition in terms of what is safe and what is not, and a geographic boundary. That is absolutely y'all's prerogative, but I just want y'all to know that this is a very long, in-depth process when you add any other type of vehicle to the city in which the city has to legalize. So this is really an issue of public safety, first and foremost, right? So when the city issues a CPNC, which is Certificate of Public Necessity and Convenience, that comes with that a level of responsibility. And so that's really the first step in this right now.
Yeah, I guess, as I told you, like, I just haven't had conversations. For example, people want to do this during Jazz Fest and get from their parked car somewhere in City Park to there. Those are some of the questions I have. And I would imagine for at least 4 of us, the Greenway is going to be an interesting conversation as a place where people are getting from A to B and doing something like this. And so anyway, I could just see some issues coming up. I see Councilmember Banks, you came off mute too.
Well, I did have questions, and obviously we'll have time to go over it, but I'm curious, it's a pedal pub, so do they sell liquor while they're driving, or how does it work? And again, we can, since we're going to not be voting on this, I can hold my questions for the other discussion, but I do have concerns about having a mobile bar, and exactly what does that mean, and what are the implications for that? And I also have real concerns with the size of it. I mean, I've got second lines throughout my district. I mean, we are the heart of the culture here. And I'm concerned that something like this, if somebody bumps into somebody and, you're out there, and I just am concerned what could happen and what would the restrictions be on where can they be and when can they be there. So I'm going to be involved in this discussion as it proceeds. Again, I will hold my questions since we aren't voting on this today, and we can discuss them in depth. So that's it.
Councilmember Banks, I just want to respond to that. You're absolutely right. I mean, by definition, in other cities, they're called pedal bars, pedal pubs, sip and cycle. These are moving bars. That's what they are. And that's what's also causing these problems, crashing into streetcars, crashing into other vehicles, multiple injuries. And then what's really crazy is the music that a lot of these are blaring. And we all know right now we're having some serious issues with sound in some other areas, and that it's mobile. It can easily go through residential neighborhoods, right? And I also want to be clear, you can look at these pictures. These are not the same vehicles that you can rent at City Park, right? It's a different way that the vehicles are situated. These are situated as a bar. And that's why these are called pedal carriages. They're different from what, again, is used in City Park. And that's by definition, which speaks to why we have to have this very clear definition right now about these pedal carriages to clearly define. And so again, we'll go back through all of y'all's offices because I really want to make sure that we're clear. This is really more of a technicality. And if somebody is interested in actually opening up the city to this type of industry, that is going to be a whole nother process that's going to take a significant amount of time to answer the questions, right, that you, Councilmember Banks, and you, Councilmember Giarrusso, have. I just know that I'm not going to be the one who is going to be ushering it forward, but any of you have more, can obviously do so if you would like. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Palmer. Thank you, Councilmember Banks. Anybody else? And do we have any comments, Paul?
You have about 5 comments on this one.
Okay.
First is from Brad Ott. As written in this proposed ordinance, I oppose the banning of pedal carriages within the city of New Orleans. If we're really serious about having complete streets and meet city, state, and national climate change goals, no blanket prohibitions of pedal carriages and other such human-powered vehicles should occur. Chris Bloom. I fully support this ordinance. The size of these vehicles create a problem by blocking car traffic and emergency vehicles on narrow roadways and streets with protected bikeways. I hate having to create an ordinance for this type of operation, but I think it will help keep neighborhoods livable, functional, and provide quality of life for residents. I think the type of vehicles could serve a special purpose use for parades and other specifically permitted functions, but as a day-to-day operating service. These are not the types of safe pedal vehicle operations Complete Streets and other advocacy groups are trying to protect and expand. These vehicles could create a negative image of cyclists and the hard work already done for their community. Cherie Teamer. Pedal Pub New Orleans is a franchise owned by New Orleans native Bhavin Chauvin and his brother Firan. This company is not currently operating in the city of New Orleans. Pedal Pub New Orleans feels that bad actors should be punished, but those who are not currently operating should not have to face additional barriers to future operation. Instead of banning all operation within the city limits, there should be an option to operate where they are properly permitted. Bhavin Chawan. My name is Bhavin Chawan of the Pedal Pub New Orleans Company. My family and I have been working on bringing Pedal Pub, a national franchise, to New Orleans. We are from New Orleans and think this concept would be great for the city, for both tourists and locals. We want to help the city come back from COVID-19 and help bring restaurants and bars customers while being responsible and safe. Working with a franchise helps us make sure we are doing the right things and avoiding serious mistakes, as they have already gone through them, and will provide us a solid framework to work within. We want to showcase the city with safety as the #1 priority. We are currently not operating because we wanted to go through the right process and not just putting these bikes out on the streets with no guidelines from the city. We have had discussions with locals and businesses to see if this would be something that would be supportive, and it seems like it is. We believe that bad actors should be punished according to the law and not punish the people that are trying to go about business in the proper way. This issue should be studied more before moving it forward. That's the last comment.
Thank you, Paul. All right, everybody. That was a full meeting today. I appreciate both committees being together because it was such important issues and the comments and questions from the floor, and as well as all the people who weighed in, particularly on Complete Streets, but as well as the other issues too. Councilmember Palmer?
No, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for chairing it for the joint committee, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, we appreciate everybody's time. Councilmember Palmer, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
I would love to. I move to adjourn.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, I'm going to take Councilmember Glappy on right over you, Councilmember Banks.
It wouldn't be the first time, man. It's okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that's 5 from Public Works, Nathan. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Everybody continue to wear your